as you know, has a background in that, and so she helped with her daughter as well. So there was a familiarity here for her. And it was extremely difficult for her because her daughter called us almost immediately because she had heard in church that morning the same information that I was receiving. And the two of them cried for a long time for Rudy, and I think for relief that it wasn't their son or brother. There are no words that can be expressed that adequately convey the sadness and the gratitude that we feel for the Acosta family. For all families that have gone through this. When I spoke to Mr. McKeon about being here today, over the weekend, he shared with me, or he asked that I share with you the following. And I'm going to ask you to bear with me because I think what I'm going to share with you is important. You all have a right to know this. I work for the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I've known him for over, I was thinking about it today, Mr. McKeon, I've known him for over 30 years. Not quite as long as you. Not even the same grandchildren. But, you know, Mr. McKeon is an interesting man. He's deeply respected in Washington. And one of the reasons is he has an ability to do what I can't do right now. It's very difficult. I'm having a hard time with it. This is not easy to talk about. And yet he can stand up and he can console and he can be with every family. He can deal with the members of the military, the chiefs of staff, the Secretary of State, and even President Obama. And you'll never know what he's thinking. Maybe once in a while. But you will know when he's serious and when his words convey meaning. Our office is working in what we believe is a partnership, not only with the Acosta family, but with all the families of all of our servicemen and women who serve in the military. Specifically to what our office has done to answer the questions that I know all of you have. On March 19th, we received the call, or Specialist Acosta died in Kandahar, Afghanistan. On March 20th, we received the official notification from the Army. On March 24th, Congressman McKeon spoke personally with Secretary of the Army, John Q., and urged him to look into the matter personally and ensure full cooperation with the Acosta family. On March 28th, Congressman McKeon sent letters to Secretary of Defense Gates, Secretary of the Army McHugh, and General Petraeus asking for confirmation and details of Rudy's death. I want to share with you some highlights from those letters. Secretary Gates, I have requested General Petraeus to take corrective measures to ensure attacks such as the one that occurred on Private Acosta, to the maximum extent possible, are preventable in the future. Given your own assessments that the U.S. military forces will be engaged in counterinsurgency efforts for the foreseeable future, which requires support and cooperation from our host government, I request that you direct a review to ensure that the Department of Defense and all combatant commands have in place processes and procedures to assess the reliability of the host nation personnel, including post-action personnel who are contracted, utilized, or employed by the U.S. military. To Secretary McHugh, he wrote, "My request to you is that you assess the training being conducted to prepare soldiers and units for counterinsurgency operations, to determine whether it is adequately preparing these soldiers and the units to detect and possibly prevent by a host nation personnel hired by the U.S. Army the type of attack that occurred, and in support of all counterinsurgency operations." To General Petraeus, he wrote, General, I want your personal assurances that your command will spare no effort to determine the root cause for this and other similar attacks by Afghans employed by the U.S. directly or hired by U.S.-funded contractors. We must reduce or eliminate the possibilities that such attacks could ever occur in the future. Further, I request that you determine whether the Afghan contractor bore responsibility for this attack and take any measures you deem necessary to hold that contractor accountable. In addition, I request that you undertake a thorough review of security guard procedures and processes that lead to the employment of Afghan contractors to provide security for U.S. forces, what oversight and controls do U.S. officials take to ensure that the Afghan contractors are properly vetting the reliability and loyalty of the personnel that they hire. There is no way to satisfactorily explain to PSC or Specialist Acosta's family how or why this attack occurred. My desire in writing you is to ensure to the maximum extent possible no such further attacks occur. On August 19th, I met with Mr. Acosta and I informed him that Congressman McKeon would be convening a committee hearing of the House Armed Services Committee on Afghan National Security Forces and extended him an invitation to attend. On September 22nd, Mr. Acosta went to D.C. and attended the hearing. Prior to the hearing, he was provided the opportunity to meet with members of Congress, including Congressman Allen West and Sylvester Reyes, Army Lieutenant General Robert Neller, Director of Operations, and Michelle Flournoy, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. During the hearing, Chairman McKeon addressed his concerns in an opening statement and posed several of his own questions. As well, the chairman submitted, on behalf of the Acosta family, a statement and additional questions from Mr. Acosta. I'd like to share with you just an excerpt from that. Chairman McKeon, good afternoon. The House Armed Services Committee meets today to receive testimony on the current status and future challenges for the Afghan National Security Forces. There is perhaps no issue more critical to our long-term strategic success in Afghanistan than the development of a professional Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police Force. Numerous officials, senior military leaders, and independent experts have appeared before this committee and attested to the progress we are making by our troops in securing Afghanistan and in training these forces. Many members of this committee have seen this progress firsthand. However, significant challenges remain to threaten our strategic success. The Afghan National Police Force remains plagued by serious corruption and units that are alleged to be controlled by warlords or other power brokers. The ANSF continues to be plagued by a high attrition rate. During the first 6 months of this year, more than 24,000 Afghan soldiers walked off the job. That's nearly 3% of the total force. Finally, significant questions remain about the ANSF's sustainability and whether the Afghan economy will be able to support the envisioned 352,000 man force. This is particularly a daunting challenge in the wake of recent reports by the Defense Department that the administration is pressuring spending cuts and planning to slash U.S. assistance to Afghanistan by more than half over the next 3 years. Secretary Flournoy and General Neller, thank you for taking the time to share your views. I look forward to your testimony. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the presence today of Mr. Acosta, whose son Rudy was killed this March serving in Kandahar. Mr. Acosta, thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the committee and staff, I'd like to express our sincerest appreciation for Rudy's service, our deepest condolences, to you and your family on his behalf. Our prayers are with you and all of those who have lost loved ones in this conflict. Mr. McKeon posed the following questions. In the first half of 2011, there were 9 attacks by Afghan forces on U.S. troops, whereas from 2005 to 2011, there were 13. General Neller, is this dramatic rise in attacks an indication that the Taliban is successfully implementing a strategy of infiltrating ANSF forces? What procedures are currently in place to vet the Afghan National Security Force for either pre-existing affiliations with the Taliban or any extremist group? How do we plan to monitor Afghan units or personnel or contractors for such affiliations, or for more common emotional issues once they are terminated for partnership? And given the importance of the U.S.-Afghan partnership to achieving our strategic objectives in Afghanistan, are you confident that we are doing everything we can to minimize the risk of such future attacks? General Neller responded, Mr. Chairman, obviously this is an area of concern for our leadership, and again I offer my condolences not just to the Acosta family, but to any member of the armed services who's lost their life. That said, this is a problem, and it has got everyone's attention. The idea of an inside threat, as we call it, is something that we have to deal with every day. It's a reality. One of the causes of this, if there is one, because we believe there are a number, I don't think it's necessarily 100% Taliban infiltrators. In fact, the evidence that we have uncovered points to the contrary. It is a variety of things. Stress, some are undetermined because in many cases, the actor in the case is killed at the same time. So we can't ever really determine what their motive was. He ended by saying the real dilemma here, though, is that we are partnering with, mentoring, working with Afghan security forces, and in a way, you have to trust them. As Americans, we want to trust people. We want to believe that they have the same motivation we do. For the record, Mr. McKeon submitted the following questions, which I think are important because I know all of you want answers and want to know if the questions were asked. On behalf of Dante and Carolyn Acosta, these questions were directed to the Undersecretary for Policy, Michelle Flournoy. Why do we trust non-Americans to guard our troops in a war zone? What are the other options to having contractors like Tundra assigned to protecting our troops in wartime and in foreign lands? Who is directly responsible for approving these contracts and implementing this policy? What ties to any government or foreign government does Tundra have? What criteria must be met by a contractor to be awarded a contract such as this? Now, or in the past, have any former employees ever worked for any agency of the U.S. government? Why are these guards allowed on base with loaded weapons? What or where is the threat to them on the convoys they escort off base? What kind of supervision are these guards under? And the final question, how are the guards trained and who trains them? Let me share with you the responses that we've received so far. First, a letter from General Petraeus. And again, I'm just going to read excerpts. Dear Chairman McKeon, up front, I assure you that we are conducting a thorough investigation to determine how and why this attack occurred. We will also assess the contractor's responsibility in this attack and take the appropriate measures to hold him accountable. Additionally, I have directed an immediate review of our processes and procedures used to hire, armed security guards to ensure a better vetting of security personnel. He goes on to say that this specific incident, immediately after the shootings, the private security company's workforce at the location was disarmed until additional counterintelligence screenings were conducted on every one of their security guards. Although there were no indications of any nefarious connections with the shooter, several guards were dismissed as a result of the additional screenings and placed on biometrically enabled watch lists to preclude their being rehired by another security company. It ends with, we will continue to take every action we can to reduce or eliminate the possibilities of such attacks in the future. Protection of our troops as they bravely carry out their important mission is my utmost concern. From Secretary of the Army, Mr. McKeon, as you have requested, the Army has conducted a review of the current deployment training requirements, which include the preparation of soldiers and their units for counterinsurgency operations. All commanders are directed to train their units on the tasks to maintain base defense. Security, establish security, react to contact, conduct anti-terrorism awareness training, maintain situational awareness, and conduct pre-combat checks on inspections for each mission. The Army believes this skill set adequately prepares soldiers to detect and protect against similar attacks in the future. Although the Army training guidance does not specifically require units to consider contracted security forces as a potential threat, infiltration of friendly forces is recognized during training as one of the many threats in operational environments associated with counterinsurgency missions. I thank you for your patience today. I'm sorry I had to take as much time, but I wanted to make sure that all of you were clear what Mr. McKeon is doing. As you can see, Chairman McKeon has asked the tough questions. He's demanded answers. He's asked questions that Mr. Acosta has. Questions that I think are shared by all of us. Some of you have offered to help. Your first offer of support I would offer is, or I would say, would be to offer your support to the Acosta family. Then offer your support to Mr. McKeon as we continue to press for answers. I'd like to end by saying that, on a personal note, both Lynn and I, as the parents of a young Marine, who most likely will be returning to Afghanistan, are confident that there is not a single member of Congress more committed to protecting and providing our servicemen and women the resources they need than Congressman McKeon. Congressman McKeon awaits each day to renew his commitment to these brave warriors whose sacrifices permit us to live free. You can be certain that Congressman McKeon will not rest until these questions are answered and the safety of our warfighters is assured. Please remember him in your prayers. He makes it a point to meet, as I said, with every family who loses a loved one. The responsibilities he shoulders as chairman of the Armed Services Committee and the weight of these concerns is a heavy burden. Let's remember him in our prayers. Let's also remember those who have provided the ultimate sacrifice and those that continue to serve today.